It was a quiet evening in Bristol, just after 8 p.m., when a family home was plunged into darkness. The shouting escalated, then abruptly ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. At the top of the stairs, a young child stood frozen, witnessing a scene no child should ever have to see. Downstairs, someone lay bleeding on the kitchen floor, while another person frantically attempted to conceal the aftermath of a horrific event. This was not merely a fight. It marked the culmination of a relationship fraught with jealousy, anger, and years of warning signs. No one anticipated that night would end in tragedy, but when the truth emerged, it left everyone in shock. Tragically, only one person would survive to recount the story. Abigail White was born in 1998 and raised in Bristol, England. However, the early chapters of her life were not characterized by innocence or joy, but rather by chaos and abuse. From a young age, Abigail found herself in a home overshadowed by violence. Her father was abusive, and she frequently witnessed him harm her mother. Although her parents eventually divorced, any hope for peace was fleeting. Abigail's mother entered a new relationship, bringing a new man into the home. Instead of stability, the cycle of abuse persisted. When Abigail's mother had another child, her stepfather's cruelty intensified, leading him to abuse Abigail as well. Eventually, the trauma was revealed, and Abigail was removed from her home and placed into foster care, but the damage had already taken root. Foster care was intended to be a turning point, a place for healing. Yet, Abigail carried her scars with her. School became a constant struggle. She had difficulty focusing, often lashed out, and reacted violently to minor disruptions. Her anger stemmed from a deep-seated place, a defense mechanism forged by years of trauma. She demanded control in all situations, frequently exploding when things did not go her way. Ultimately, her behavior led to expulsion, and she was transferred to a school designed for students with serious behavioral issues. She briefly lived with her grandmother, but that environment proved too volatile as well. The elderly woman could not manage Abigail's unpredictable moods. At just 13, Abigail was sent back to her biological father, an alcoholic incapable of providing stability or guidance. Despite her efforts to attend therapy, her pain remained raw. She turned to drinking, followed by cocaine, later stating that drugs were her only escape from the relentless darkness in her mind. By the age of 15, Abigail had attempted suicide twice. That year, she met her first boyfriend, experiencing a glimpse of what she believed love could feel like. For 7 months, she felt a semblance of happiness. However, when the relationship ended, she spiraled once more, and her next relationship would prove even more damaging. At 16, she began dating a 29-year-old man, an age gap that raised eyebrows, yet no red flags seemed to halt the relationship. It lasted 2 years, concluding shortly after she turned 18 and aged out of foster care. Abigail moved into social housing, a modest space that, for her, felt like a true home for the first time. It was during this period that she reconnected with Bradley Lewis. They had known each other during their school years, but as adults, their relationship deepened. Abigail was 19 and Bradley was 17. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they soon welcomed their first child. Over the next 5 years, 2 more children followed. By 23, Abigail was a mother of 3, while Bradley, just 21, worked full-time as a floor installer. Abigail stayed home, raising their children and attempting to build a life. However, living on a single income proved challenging. Desperate to contribute financially, she sought alternative ways to earn money from home, eventually discovering online adult modeling. Under the pseudonym Fake Barbie, Abigail launched an OnlyFans account. Her content was bold, provocative, and quickly gained traction, earning her £50,000 in just a year. Although her income eventually declined, it still provided a steady stream of money and a taste of validation she had never experienced before. However, financial stability did not resolve the underlying issues. Behind the scenes, her relationship with Bradley was deteriorating. Their home life became toxic, marked by endless arguments, violent outbursts, and repeated breakups, followed by reconciliations. Neither seemed capable of walking away, even as the emotional damage mounted. Abigail's rage extended beyond their household. In one alarming incident, she attacked a woman in a nightclub bathroom, convinced the woman had looked at her the wrong way. The victim suffered severe injuries, and Abigail was later sentenced to 12 months of community service. In her daily life, Abigail was controlling, demanding that everything go her way. She issued orders to Bradley with zero tolerance for disobedience, and any failure to comply would trigger explosive reactions. She craved constant affirmation, from compliments to gifts, and any perceived neglect would lead to violent confrontations. The relationship between Abigail White and Bradley Lewis had long ceased to resemble anything healthy. What remained was a tangled web of fights, betrayals, and emotional warfare. Most days were filled with shouting matches and cold silences that stretched late into the night. The damage was not confined to just the two of them. Their children were caught in the crossfire, silently absorbing the chaos surrounding them. From an outsider's perspective, the solution seemed clear. They needed to separate. Yet neither Abigail nor Bradley appeared ready to walk away. Their relationship was riddled with infidelity, but they were not in an open relationship. Both cheated, both were aware of each other's affairs, and both reacted with jealousy. Abigail, in particular, demanded immediate responses to her messages. Any delay sent her spiraling into paranoia, convinced that Bradley was with another woman. Ironically, while she was also seeing other men, their personal boundaries blurred even further as they engaged in group sexual encounters. Their situation was not merely dysfunctional, it was explosive. Things worsened when Abigail became pregnant and discovered that Bradley had not only been unfaithful, but had also fathered a child with another woman. For a time, he was expecting 2 babies with 2 different women. This betrayal intensified an already volatile dynamic. Abigail's rage was relentless, and the presence of Bradley's other child only exacerbated her emotional instability. Friends and family on both sides urged them to separate before something irreversible occurred. Abigail's parents openly despised Bradley, not only for his repeated infidelities, but also for inappropriate messages he allegedly sent to Abigail's sister. Conversely, Bradley's family had their own reasons to distrust Abigail, especially after she stabbed him in the leg during an argument. Although the wound was not life-threatening, it served as a physical reminder of the turmoil they both refused to escape. Around this time, Abigail's previous assault in a nightclub caught the attention of social services. Authorities conducted a welfare check concerned for the children's well-being. The verdict was clear. Abigail and Bradley were living in a toxic and potentially dangerous environment. To avoid losing custody, they agreed to live apart. Bradley moved in with his mother, experiencing his first taste of peace in years. This brief separation provided him with clarity, prompting him to seriously consider ending the relationship for good. However, when he expressed his doubts to Abigail, her reaction was immediate and severe. She threatened to harm herself, an alarming threat given her mental health history. Over time, her threats escalated. She claimed she would kill the women Bradley had cheated with, the mother of his other child, his own mother, and eventually, Bradley himself. By early 2022, Abigail's downward spiral continued in public view. She began posting aggressive and disturbing content on TikTok, airing the couple's dirty laundry without restraint. She mocked Bradley, shared intimate details, and even confessed to violent behavior she had inflicted upon him. Bradley felt increasingly trapped, confiding in friends that he feared for his safety, but was too afraid of what Abigail might do if he left for good. Then, in March 2022, Abigail discovered she was pregnant again, convinced that Bradley was the father. However, Bradley had his doubts. Just days after learning of the pregnancy, Abigail began searching online for information about miscarriages. On March 18th, she made the decision to terminate the pregnancy. Although Bradley supported her afterward, it was not a mutual decision. The following day, March 19th, tensions erupted once more. Abigail accused Bradley of cheating, and the fight culminated in her stabbing him in the arm. He required medical treatment, but chose not to report the truth, instead telling hospital staff it was an accident. Privately, Abigail messaged a friend, admitting that her relationship had become so dangerous that she believed it would end in one of two ways: either she would be dead or she would end up in prison. She confessed without hesitation that she believed herself capable of killing Bradley. Just 6 days later, on March 25th, the couple met in a park for what was supposed to be a final honest conversation. Abigail brought a friend along, likely to maintain some sense of control or protection. During the meeting, Bradley informed her that he was ending the relationship for good. Surprisingly, Abigail did not erupt. She remained eerily calm. However, with Abigail White, calmness was often the precursor to catastrophe. Later that same day, they planned to meet again at a pub, inviting a few close friends. Abigail brought their 3 children along, perhaps attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy. They agreed to meet around 5 p.m., but by that time, Bradley was still nowhere to be found. At 5:30 p.m., the tone shifted. Abigail began sending furious messages, incensed by his tardiness. Her anger was exacerbated by the alcohol she had already consumed, and she had also taken drugs, amplifying her volatility. When Bradley finally arrived at 7 p.m., he was met not with a smile, but with raw, seething rage. Abigail had convinced herself that he had been with another woman. Seeking a moment of respite, Bradley retreated to the restroom with a friend, desperate to decompress and speak freely. There, he expressed how lost he felt and how helpless the situation had become. He no longer knew how to reason with Abigail. However, even in that small private space, there was no escape. When they emerged, Abigail was waiting just outside the door. She exploded, screaming and accusing them of conspiring against her. Before anyone could react, she lunged at Bradley. In front of stunned onlookers, Abigail launched into a violent assault. Bradley's friend attempted to intervene, but Abigail spat directly in his face. The situation escalated beyond control, prompting Bradley's friends to decide to leave. Abigail and Bradley remained, trying once more to patch things up, but the evening was already beyond salvage. In an attempt to de-escalate, Bradley ordered a round of beers, but Abigail slapped them off the table, sending glass and foam crashing to the floor. Customers looked on in disbelief, and strangers tried to intervene, but Abigail turned on them as well, throwing a drink at one man and spitting in his face. When the man tried to push her away in defense, Abigail fell. She immediately called the police to report an assault, omitting the crucial detail that she had provoked the confrontation. Her children witnessed the entire ordeal, absorbing yet another violent chapter in their already unstable home life. By 8 p.m., the couple and their children left the pub. A friend they met outside offered them a ride home. On the way back, Bradley made a comment that would later send chills down the spine of everyone who heard it. "I'm already dead," he said, aware of what likely awaited him at home. Tragically, he was right. As soon as they stepped through the front door, the argument resumed, louder, angrier, and more volatile than ever. Abigail blamed Bradley for what had transpired at the pub, furious that he had not defended her against the man she accused of attacking her. At some point during the shouting, Abigail walked into the kitchen and returned holding a knife. Bradley had seen this before. Knives were not new to their arguments, but this time she did not hesitate. In one swift, violent motion, Abigail plunged the knife directly into his chest. Unbeknownst to them, their 3-year-old son had crept downstairs, drawn by the noise, and witnessed the entire scene. Both Abigail and Bradley froze, the rage dissipating and replaced by stunned silence. Bradley, bleeding heavily, stumbled back into the kitchen and collapsed onto the floor. Instead of immediately calling for help, Abigail panicked. Rather than grabbing the phone, she grabbed cleaning supplies, putting Bradley's blood-stained shirt into the washing machine and attempting to scrub the floor clean. She did not want anyone to see what she had done, not even herself. This was the 3rd time Abigail had injured Bradley with a knife, But this time she knew it was different. This wound would not fade into a scar. It was too deep. Moments later, a neighbor named Laura heard the chaos and rushed over. She found Abigail distraught, barefoot, wearing a pink dress and sporting a bruise on her arm, but no trace of blood. Meanwhile, Bradley lay motionless on the kitchen floor. As Laura leaned over him to check for a pulse, she felt the faintest trace of breath. With trembling hands, she began performing CPR while still on the phone with emergency services. The operator instructed her to apply pressure directly to the wound in his chest. As she did, she noticed something deeply alarming. Very little blood was escaping, a terrifying sign that Bradley was likely bleeding internally, his body beginning to shut down. Laura attempted to place him in the recovery position, but he was too heavy for her to move alone. Around 8:22 p.m., Laura's husband returned home and immediately sensed that something was wrong next door. Upon entering the house, he found his wife desperately trying to keep Bradley alive and took over chest compressions. Time was slipping away. By 8:48 p.m., police had arrived. Abigail, already spiraling into hysteria, had called a friend and claimed that Bradley had harmed himself. She insisted he had tried to take his own life and begged for reassurance that he would survive. The narrative had already begun to shift. Moments later, paramedics arrived. Bradley, just 22 years old, was rushed to the hospital and taken straight into surgery. However, the damage was too severe. The knife had penetrated deeply, straight into his heart. Despite hours of surgical efforts, doctors pronounced him dead. Back at the scene, Abigail White was arrested. Even during her interrogation, she maintained a version of events that did not add up. Initially, she claimed that Bradley had stabbed himself. Then, she changed her story, stating that he had wrestled the knife from her. Later, she insisted that Bradley had grabbed her hand while she was holding the knife and forced it into himself. The narrative kept shifting, each version seemingly tailored to evade blame. What Abigail failed to account for was the presence of a silent witness, her 3-year-old son, who had seen everything. Incredibly, despite his age, the child was able to provide police with a clear and damning statement: "Mommy stabbed Daddy." This heartbreaking confirmation aligned with what investigators already suspected. The evidence was overwhelming, and eventually Abigail could no longer deny her actions. She confessed, but claimed it had been a moment of passion, not premeditation. She insisted she had not meant to kill Bradley, only to hurt him in a moment of rage. However, one detail was impossible to overlook. Abigail never called an ambulance. While Bradley lay dying on the floor, she chose to mop up his blood, toss his shirt in the wash, and stage the scene. She claimed she had tried to call for help but could not get a signal. Yet she managed to contact a friend to concoct a story about suicide. As detectives delved deeper, they uncovered chilling internet searches made by Abigail in the days leading up to the murder. She had looked up how to tie a noose and whether someone could die from a broken heart. On March 17th, just 1 week before the killing, she searched not only for miscarriage-related topics, but also for information about stabbing incidents. In October 2022, Abigail White stood trial at Bristol Crown Court. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including surveillance footage from the pub, her disturbing TikTok rants, voice messages, and over 200 witness statements. Her plea to downgrade the charge to manslaughter was rejected. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Psychiatrists testified that Abigail suffers from borderline personality disorder, a diagnosis rooted in the profound trauma of her early life. However, mental illness alone could not excuse the choices she made. Today, Abigail White remains behind bars. Reports have surfaced suggesting she is in a new relationship and has even requested conjugal visits, a fact that continues to anger many who knew and loved Bradley. His family, still reeling from the loss, expressed what so many felt, that no sentence could truly reflect the life that was stolen. They claimed they were given their own life sentence, waking up each day to a reality without their son, brother, and father of 3. Bradley's memory, however, lives on. Hundreds attended his funeral, and public memorials now stand in his honor across South Gloucestershire. His kindness, love for his children, and enduring popularity are remembered by all who knew him. To them, he is not gone. He is still their son, still a father, still loved, and always will be. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.